Hi, my name is Scott Abele, Training Manager here at Lopi Stoves. I'd like to thank Quinn for taking the time to go through the features of these two great new stoves. I'm going to take some time to go through the new TouchSmart Control with you, as well as some daily maintenance tips. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about the TouchSmart Control. The TouchSmart Control is how you're going to be giving commands to the pellet stove and receiving status updates. The TouchSmart Control is touch sensitive, very similar to the technology used on your cell phone. To wake the board up, you can either wave your hand across it, you have to be about an inch away, or you can touch any of the buttons. When you touch the button, the board will wake up. The board stays illuminated for about 30 seconds. Let's also identify some of the buttons. We have our fan setting here across the top, and there's a series of 10 lights. And as you slide your finger across, you can set those settings. And you can preset them so that when you turn the stove on, that's the setting that it'll run at. Next, you have your LED display. You have your heat setting. Again, a series of 10 lights for your heat setting. Your power button, your menu button, thermostat button, and Autofan button. And we're going to take a few minutes and go through how each of these buttons work and what different commands you have available to you. The fan setting. The fan setting is here along the top. And we're going to talk about the fan setting as well as the Autofan because they're very much associated with each other. The fan setting is the setting of the room fan that blows the heat into the room. Now this fan won't come on until the stove is hot, which is after the ignition sequence. So once the fire has lit and you have a good fire going, after about 15-20 minutes from the time you hit the power button is when your room fan is going to come on. Now that time varies based on room temperature and on the BTU content of the fuel, but that's a rough estimate of when that room fan comes on. When the room fan comes on, you will have control of basically how fast that fan is turning and how much heat it's going to blow out. Now the reason we're going to talk about this button as well as the Autofan button is that the Autofan button does something really interesting. It ties together the fan setting and the heat setting so that whenever you move the heat setting, the fan goes with it. You'll notice that those lights are now basically synced with each other so that they're in unison. That way, wherever you have the heat setting, the fan setting is going to be matched with it so that you get the maximum amount of heat based on the heat setting that you've adjusted to. To go in and out of the Autofan setting, it's just simply touching the button, turning it off, turning it back on, or off. The heat setting. The heat setting is how you're going to adjust the heat output of the appliance. So the lower the heat setting, the less heat it's going to produce. The higher the heat setting, the more heat it's going to produce. Another way to look at the heat setting button has to do with the burn rate, or in other words, the amount of fuel that the stove is burning. For instance, if you have it on a heat level 1, you're going to be burning through about 1.5 pounds of fuel per hour. Versus if you have it on heat level 10, you're going to be burning approximately 6 pounds of fuel per hour. So depending on what temperature you want to keep the room or the amount of fuel that you want to burn based on need, it gives you a rough idea of how often you might need to refill the stove. Next is the power button. When you're ready to start the stove, you can simply press the power button. It'll say starting, and the stove will start going through the startup sequence. While the stove is in startup sequence, you can adjust your preset, your fan setting, as well as your heat setting, so that once the stove goes into run mode or heating mode, those settings are already set. When you're ready to turn the appliance off, simply push the button again. It'll say stopping, cooling down, and the red light on the power button will become illuminated. Next, we have our menu button. The menu button is the button with the 3 lines right here. The first time you push it, you're going to get an instruction page that shows you how to change some of the settings on the stove. The next push is how you adjust the internal thermostat. Run your finger to the right, we'll turn that thermostat setting up. To the left, we'll turn it down. And you can keep running it, you can go continuously like that to get it to go up to the setting that you desire. The next push is how you adjust whether you're going to be using the internal or the external thermostat. Simply press the illuminated lights underneath the word and it'll make that proper setting. The next push is how you adjust to your different thermostat program modes, which we'll go into in some more detail in the next chapter. The final push is how you lock the screen. You can either unlock or lock the screen. So once you get the settings set that you desire, you can have that locked. Because this is a TouchSmart control, you want to make sure that children or animals can't change settings and accidentally turn the appliance on or off. And at this point, you can just let the board go back to the ready state. It takes about 10 seconds. Next, we have our thermostat button. The thermostat button is the one that looks like a little thermometer. Again, the first time you touch it is just to wake it up. You'll notice it says slide to unlock. I left this in the screen lock mode, so it means it needs a little bit of extra command, a little bit of extra input in order to wake it up. This is, again, to prevent animals or children from changing settings. When you press the thermostat button, you either basically put it into thermostat mode or take it out of thermostat mode. So if the green light's illuminated, you're in thermostat mode, and whatever settings you have previously set in the menu will now take command of the stove. When you want to turn it out of menu or out of thermostat mode, press the button again, it'll go back to manual mode, and now you can manually control the stove. Next, we have our thermostat program modes. This is accessed by pressing the menu button. 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And you'll see the words slow cool, fast cool, and low burn. Slow cool is a step-down process, a step-down thermostat. It's going to start at wherever the heat setting is that you've set it at, and then step down in 15-minute increments until eventually it turns the stove off. So it's going to slowly cool the stove down, trying to maintain the heat that you've got it set for. The next one is fast cool. Fast cool, as soon as the set temperature is reached, it's going to step the stove down to program to heat setting number 1 and run for 15 minutes and then turn the stove off if there's no more call for heat. And then finally low burn, once there's no longer a call for heat, the stove is going to go to heat setting number 1 and maintain that until the point that there's more heat required, at which it'll go back to the heat output that you have set. Maintenance on a pellet stove is very important. Probably one of the more important things that you can do to, ensure years of trouble-free use from your stove. But the steps are pretty simple. The first thing we want to do is we just want to do just a basic visual inspection, especially when the stove's running, to make sure that the fire's running like it should. A pellet fire should be nice and vigorous, should have some good activity to it. The one thing you can do to affect that is actually the air control. So there's a little knob here in the back, and what that knob does, you can pull it in and out and actually adjust how much combustion air you have coming into the fire. And so you're going to want to sort of look at that. If it's not enough, if the fire sort of looks a bit too lazy, you're going to make sure that's opened up. If the fire's burning really, really vigorously, then you want to close it. Generally, the rule is that you just leave it, let the dealer adjust that for you and just sort of leave it where it's at. Dealer or the installer, whomever you had do the installation for you. So let's start with look at some of the maintenance. We're going to open the door. One of the first things you're going to look at is the gasket. So the door gasket around here, the gasket should be in good shape, shouldn't be frayed. It's going to basically seal against this edge right here, which is called a pinch seal. And so as long as that gasket's in good shape, and it should last for several years, so you shouldn't have to worry about it. It's probably, it's going to be fine for, like I said, for a long time. The next inspection you want to do, or sort of visual cue you want to look at, is down here inside the stove, and we're going to want to look at the burn platform. So we remove this little cover called the visual deflector, and you're going to keep this on the stove. Anytime it's in operation, you're going to have this in place. And then just look down at the burn platform. Now in the burn platform, what you're looking for is just to make sure that it's clear and doesn't have what's called, what you want to avoid is what's called a clinker. A clinker is basically just a hardened bit of ash. And sometimes they can get in sort of the wrong place. Specifically back here in this back left corner where your igniter is. And so we provide several tools for you to help clean. We have this interesting little tool here. It's a scraper. And so you can use this. It's angled, so it allows you to get back in there and you can scrape out if there's a clinker. And you can just scrape it down into the ash pan. This other end has a little point on it. And what that point would be is if you've got, specific holes in that burn platform that are clogged, you can clean those out. But most of the time, you're just going to need to use this brush. And obviously, you're doing your maintenance when the stove's not, there's no fire. And so you're just going to brush off, anything that's loose, excess like that. And that's not something you need to do necessarily every time you start the stove, but certainly maybe once a week or so, just make sure that it's clean and that there's no obstructions. Some of this is really going to depend on the quality of fuel you're burning. The higher quality fuels are going to burn cleaner. The lower quality, you're going to have higher ash content, less heat, those kinds of things. The stove is designed to burn any, like I said, it's we consider an all-grade pellet, but you are going to get better performance out of a better pellet. When we start digging in here a little bit deeper, a couple of the things you're going to want to look at is we can actually remove the burn platform. There's a little key, so you pull that key out, and the burn platform just lifts out. So again, we're talking about these holes here that you're going to want to keep clean. And then the other thing that you want to look for is up here in the top. If we remove just this top part of the liner, so stainless steel liner, remove that top part. If you look up in the top, what you're going to see is this. It's cast iron, and this is the heat exchange. And it sits in the stove just like this. And so when you look up in the top of your stove, what you're looking at is you're looking at this part right here. And what can happen is you can get ash that'll build up on that, basically on the top of the firebox. And so when you're doing your basically your weekly maintenance, you're going to want to look at this and take this brush and just brush off those fins right there. The ash can actually collect on that over time, and usually quite a bit of time, but over time, and it actually acts as an insulating blanket. And so what'll happen is the stove won't be heating as well as it did when they're clean. So if you keep those clean, it'll actually allow the stove to heat better and more efficiently. So other than that, those are really the things you want to look for. One other really important tool that you might want to consider as far as maintaining your stove is what's called an ash vac. Got one right here. So an ash vac is really nice because it has a metal bucket, and it's designed for vacuuming ash and soot and those kinds of things. And it has that metal bucket because in case you were to vacuum up an ember or something like that, there's still some heat to it. You don't have to worry about it melting the plastic like you would on a shop vac. The last area we want to check is underneath the stove, which is where your ash pan is located. It's right here. Slides out pretty simply. We have a handle here that you can use. There's also a lifting handle here on the top, so you can carry it. You want to check this periodically to make sure that it hasn't filled with ash. Anytime you do empty this, you want to use a metal receptacle. That way, in case there's any hot ash or embers that are still left in here, they're not going to catch fire or anything like that. Once this is dumped out, it can go back. Anytime you open this door, the other thing you want to check is this gasket. So this gasket, along with the door gasket here, you want to make sure that they're not frayed, that they're in good shape. They create a seal into the firebox. So you're going to make sure that that's a good tight seal along with the door gasket, and we can close the stove back up. And once everything's back in place, the stove's ready to burn. If you have further questions about maintaining your stove, you can always consult your owner's manual, where we have more detailed instructions on weekly, monthly, and annual maintenance. On behalf of Quinn Wilkes and myself, Scott Abley, we'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch this training video. As you begin your life with your new Lopi pellet appliance, we know you're going to have years of comfort and warmth from it. If you should have future questions about your pellet appliance, there's several resources for you. First, there's the owner's manual that came with the stove. We have a maintenance section in there, as well as a troubleshooting table to help answer those questions. Second, there's your local dealer who you purchased the appliance from. They're a wonderful resource to help you make decisions about buying new pellets and about maintaining your stove. And finally, you can always go to www.lopistoves.com, click on the technical support tab, and drop us an email. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Again, welcome to the Lopi family. We know you're going to love your new Lopi pellet appliance.